Welcome to the second video in the Tobacco Cessation Strategies for Special Populations series. This video will be geared towards strategies that will help with smoking cessation among LGBTQ populations. This video was created to accompany the LGBTQ Outreach Toolkit, which is currently available to tobacco prevention and control coalitions through the Texas Department of State Health Services. In case you are interested in receiving Certified Health Education Specialist continuing education credits, this video will focus on the following competencies. 1. How to involve priority populations, partners, and other stakeholders in the planning process. 2. How to use strategies to convene priority populations, partners, and other stakeholders. And 3. How to identify, develop, and deliver messages using a variety of communication strategies, methods, and techniques. The LGBTQ community is disproportionately impacted by tobacco, as seen in their higher smoking rates, especially among younger individuals. Increased smoking rates are often attributed to higher levels of stress and societal discrimination experienced by members of the LGBTQ community. Additionally, smoking is often a social activity that takes place in bars and clubs, places that may be viewed as a safe or even a designated space for LGBTQ individuals. To get the full picture of the current situation, let's start by looking at some statistics of smoking rates within LGBTQ communities. First, the LGBTQ National Tobacco Control Network estimates that this community is 50% to 200% more likely to be addicted to tobacco than heterosexual individuals. LGBTQ adolescents also smoke at a much higher rate compared to their heterosexual counterparts. The tobacco industry has targeted the LGBTQ community since the early 1990s. This has occurred through advertising at pride festivals and other LGBTQ community events, as well as financially contributing to both national and local LGBTQ and HIV/AIDS organizations. Finally, although LGBTQ smokers believe smoking increases their risk of diseases such as lung cancer and heart disease, few have made quit attempts. For example, 75% of LGBTQ smokers compared with 80% of all adult smokers have made quit attempts.
So hi, my name is George Cunningham and I'm with the Department of Health and Kinesiology at Texas A&M University. And when working with LGBT populations, there's a couple things to keep in mind. The first is terminology. So LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. And sometimes you'll hear acronyms that stretch on beyond that. So LGBTQIA, etc., etc. For our purposes, I'll focus on LGBT. The L, the G, and the B focus on lesbian, gay, and bisexual. And that's related to someone's sexual orientation. That's who we have attractions to, who we fantasize about, and who we have different behaviors with, either relationships or sexual activities. The T refers to transgender, and that refers to people's gender identity and expression, as well as their sex assigned at birth. So, for example, someone may have a sex assigned at birth of male, but identify in terms of their gender identity as a woman and express themselves in feminine ways. In that case, there may not be a congruence between the sex assigned at birth and their gender identity and expression, in which case they may be considered transgender or trans for short. On the other hand, cisgender refers to when there's congruence or alignment among the gender identity, gender expression, and sex assigned at birth. So terminology is one thing.
When working with any special population, it is important to make sure that you understand some key terminology. We would like to start by reviewing some key terms that are important to understand when working with LGBTQ communities. First, LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer individuals. An ally is someone who confronts heterosexism, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, heterosexual and gender straight privilege in themselves and others, or someone who is concerned for the well-being of LGBTQ people. Bisexual refers to a person emotionally, physically, and/or sexually attracted to persons of more than one gender, not necessarily in equal amounts or at the same time. Coming out is the process by which one shares one's sexuality, gender identity, intersex status, or ally affiliation with others. It is often said that a person is coming out to friends or something similar. This can be a continual, lifelong process. Gay is a term used in some cultural settings to represent males who are attracted to males in a romantic, erotic, or emotional sense. The term is also used to refer to the non-heterosexual orientation or as an individual identity label for anyone who does not identify as heterosexual. Transgender refers to a person who lives as a member of a gender other than that expected based on anatomical sex. Sexual orientation of transgender individuals varies and is not dependent on gender identity. Gender identity is a person's sense of being masculine, feminine, or somewhere in between. Heteronormativity is the belief or assumption that all people are heterosexual or that heterosexuality is the default or normal state of a human being. Heterosexism is the assumption that everyone is heterosexual and that heterosexuality is superior and normal compared to homosexuality. Homophobia is the irrational fear or hatred of homosexuals, homosexuality, or any behavior or belief that does not conform to rigid sex role stereotypes. Lesbian is a term used to describe female-identified people attracted to other female-identified people. Queer is an umbrella term which embraces a variety of sexual orientations and identities. Sexual orientation is the desire for intimate, emotional, and/or sexual relationships with people of the same gender or sex, another gender or sex, or multiple genders or sexes.
Another thing to keep in mind is the diversity of the LGBT population. Even though we lump everybody together, there are different experiences that transgender individuals have relative to lesbians or gays or bisexual individuals. There's also diversity in terms of age, in terms of race, in terms of ethnicity, and any other dimension that we can think of. So it's important to remember that it's not a homogeneous group. Instead, it's a diverse group of individuals.
In the first presentation, we went over in detail the 5 steps for tobacco prevention and control coalitions to use when implementing smoking cessation strategies. During this presentation, we will focus on Step 2, which is developing strategies for outreach with special populations, and in this case, the LGBTQ community. I will now tell you about a couple of strategies that were developed through interviews with members of and people serving LGBTQ communities. The first strategy is all about crafting an appropriate message for your community. In order to successfully capture the attention of your target audience and communicate effectively, you need to carefully design a message that is both meaningful and relevant. If you assume that a one-size-fits-all approach will work, you run the risk of alienating LGBTQ community members and wasting valuable resources. Here are some tips to consider when creating your message. First, use meaningful images and symbols. Perhaps the most well-known imagery associated with the LGBTQ community is the rainbow flag. The flag was commissioned by famous LGBTQ activist Harvey Milk in 1975. The flag was meant to be a positive, new symbol to replace the tragic history of the usual pink triangle symbol commonly used by the community at the time. Each stripe is a different color and represents an important and valued aspect of the community and the movement. Next, be aware of important cultural and historical events. For example, the Pride season usually takes place in the summer months and is meant to celebrate LGBTQ pride and honor the Stonewall riots of June 1969. Pride festivals and parades often involve a wide variety of vendors and public health outreach organizations. This represents a great opportunity and place to increase awareness of smoking cessation resources, your coalition, and show support and understanding for the community. You will also want to ensure that you use up-to-date and inclusive language. Ensure that you are not using out-of-date language in your advertisements or outreach materials. Though unintentional, it can appear insensitive or hurtful. For instance, the label homosexual is not an acceptable term to use because it has been negatively used in the past. The preferred broad term for the community is LGBT or LGBTQ. However, this is quickly evolving to a more inclusive LGBT+. Finally, and this is crucially important, don't forget that each target audience is comprised of smaller, more specific subpopulations. As with any target audience, do not assume that the LGBTQ population is a single group. Keep in mind that people from all races, ethnicities, genders, socioeconomic statuses, abilities, education levels, and geographic regions identify as part of the LGBTQ community. Within these subgroups, such as people of color, disabled individuals, women, or even rural inhabitants, individuals may have very specific experiences or issues that are not represented in the larger media representation of the LGBTQ community. Additionally, within the LGBTQ community, the experiences of bisexuals are likely to be different from gays or lesbians. Transgender individuals may experience different sorts of discrimination, and so on. It is important to not only recognize that LGBTQ is not a homogeneous group, but rather diverse in itself. Consider portraying diverse individuals in advertisements, and do not assume that a single message will work for all, even within one special population. The next strategy is about how to utilize the media. There are lots of opportunities to promote media messages about smoking cessation. However, tailoring should be taken into account to ensure that messages appeal to the LGBTQ population. Media campaigns that are relatable to LGBTQ people and use language that is non-heteronormative are critical to spreading information in a culturally competent way. LGBTQ symbols, like a rainbow, as well as lesbian, gay, or transgender actors, should be featured in ads. TPCCs should use different types of media to convey messages to LGBTQ individuals, including printed media, electronic media, and social media. To start, let's talk about printed media. Newspapers, magazines, and flyers are all types of printed media that can convey your messages. Messages should be endorsed by creditable sources within the LGBTQ community, like a LGBTQ-friendly healthcare provider or local leaders. Effective advertising can increase knowledge, counteract myths, and motivate people to change behavior. Printed media should send a message that LGBTQ residents will benefit from not smoking and engage the audience in a way that the message is easily understood. Since, as we already talked about, one message won't appeal to every audience, several messages should be developed that target unique groups. Specific examples of printed media are posters, billboards, and point-of-purchase advertisements, which engage the consumer as they are making their decision. Next is electronic media. Tobacco companies have shifted away from promoting their products through traditional media sources, and instead they focus on digital media and retail outlets. As a result, electronic sources are especially important in promoting smoke-free messages. Online sources, including websites, blogs, or online advertisements, are useful ways to share information about smoking cessation to a wide audience. Once again, It is important to recognize that differences exist within the LGBTQ community, so messages and approaches should be tailored as appropriate based on geography, culture, and background of the group you're trying to reach. One very important facet of electronic media is social media. This includes Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms. This can be a great way that your TPCC can build support and reach your target audience. It is especially relevant to younger individuals and can be done at a low cost. Keep in mind that different age demographics have varying preferences as to what social media platforms they use, and new types of social media are emerging constantly. When posting social media announcements, work with your partners to retweet or share your post with their followers, and also find out what sources are most relevant to the people you are trying to reach. You can even share the same message across multiple platforms. This is an easy way to reach a new group of people and increase the reach of your messages. You should also consider following national or well-known organizations who focus on LGBTQ rights or smoking cessation so that you have access to the information that they post. You don't always have to create messages. Sometimes you can just share posts from other organizations. Some social media platforms limit the amount of text that you can write, so it's helpful to include a hyperlink to your website with additional information. To make it interesting and eye-catching, share pictures or graphics that are related to your topic. Visuals grab the attention of your audience, and people are more likely to read what you post if they are already interested. Lastly, hashtags are a good way to group your content. Examples of hashtags to be used are found in the online toolkit, as well as video advertisements and other resources that you can share via social media. Always be on the lookout for new materials and resources to help you reach the LGBTQ individuals in your community. One example of this is smokefree.gov, which has a section developed for helping LGBTQ smokers quit. The available resources include an app, an option to chat with a counselor online, and tips and tricks for this population. The This Free Life campaign is an example of a campaign that was developed to reach LGBTQ populations. Online, there are ideas and tips for messaging. Their key messages include emphasizing the negative health consequences and addiction risks of tobacco use, educating LGBT young adults about the harms of tobacco use, the dangerous mix of chemicals found in cigarette smoke, and how tobacco use negatively affects aspects of life that are important to LGBT young adults, while a tobacco-free lifestyle aligns with LGBT ideals such as being free.
The third thing to keep in mind is the stigma that LGBT individuals experience. So throughout the U.S., there are different forms of prejudice and discrimination expressed toward LGBT individuals. For example, in 29 states, including Texas, it's legal to fire somebody or to not hire somebody based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. So certainly the prejudice and discrimination that people experience impacts their overall daily lives, their overall well-being, and their attitudes toward different activities. So it's important to keep that in mind.
As we learned in the first video, while you are implementing strategies for outreach, always be sure to keep track of your progress and evaluate. That way you will know what works best for the LGBTQ community in your area. For more details on how to evaluate your activities, you can refer back to video 1 in our series or look at the toolkits. It is also important to consider the sustainability of your work. The core elements for sustainability should include buy-in from key leaders and decision makers, leadership, resources, communication mechanisms, and processes to maintain operations or activities. Take a close look at who within the community, whether it's organizations or individuals, can help sustain the work. Also, use the information that you collect from your evaluation to determine the most effective strategies and focus your sustainability efforts accordingly. For more information about sustainability, take a look at Video 1 of this series or the toolkits found on the Texas Department of State Health Services website. As we come to the end of this training, we hope that you feel ready to utilize strategies to help close the gap in smoking cessation rates that exist in LGBTQ communities. The next step is to talk with your coalition about some of the strategies you have learned in this presentation that you all feel will work best within your community. Presented here are some questions to get you started. Take 5 minutes to consider these on your own, and then see if your coalition agrees. Thank you for joining us today for this presentation. For more information, be sure to look into the full toolkit for tips on how to plan smoking cessation efforts focused on LGBTQ communities.
And then finally, most people are not experts when it comes to LGBT topics or inclusion-related activities. The good news is other people are, so it's important to ask. Ask others if you're unsure about things, or seek out different organizations or websites. The American Psychological Association has a wonderful page related to sexual orientation and gender identity. The same with the Human Rights Campaign. If you're interested in transgender topics, the Transgender Education Network has a wonderful website that provides additional information as well. So if you don't know, ask or seek out the information. Thanks.